Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to my garden. For today's topic, I wanted to cover summertime flower care. But before we get down to business, I have to share these amazing foxtail lilies with you. Now, these grow from bulbs. I bought 3 of them in the fall of 2020, and last spring all 3 sprouted, but I only had leaves. And I think that's probably to be expected because the plants likely need to get a good root system going first. This spring, I've been treated to 2 of the flowers, and hopefully next year we'll get all 3 of them blooming. But look at these amazing flower spikes. I'm 5'7", and it goes way up to there. Wow. Okay, so let's talk about flower care. When it comes to growing and enjoying your flowers, there's really 3 main things that you need to address. One is certainly to make sure that they're getting enough water. The second item is deadheading them, meaning removing the spent flowers, and that way the plant doesn't use up any energy on forming seeds. Instead, it focuses on creating more blooms that you can enjoy. And the third thing is to make sure that you don't have a lot of weeds within your flowers, because weeds compete with our plants for moisture, nutrients, and space. So unfortunately, weeding is something that has to be done. It's quite the task here, and I've just been slowly working my way around the yard trying to keep up with them. The majority of our bearded irises have finished blooming, and we have a lot of them all throughout our landscape because they're so easy to grow, they're beautiful, and they're easy to propagate. But the thing is, I do not want to leave these spent flower stalks in place because many of them will try to develop seeds up here, and that takes away energy from the roots for next year's bloom. So what I'm going to do is to go as low as I can and remove them. It's a pretty easy task, really, but it's also going to make your garden look a lot nicer if you take these off. Another thing that I like to deadhead is the columbines. Again, what they're going to do if I just leave them on the plants is they're going to form a lot of seeds, and I'd rather have them keep blooming, and I also don't want a gazillion columbines all over, even though they're such a lovely flower. So off they go. Sometimes you just do not want a plant to spread any more than it already has. And this is an awesome hardy geranium that I really enjoy, but it is taking over this whole area of the flower bed. And that's probably because I did not do a good job of deadheading them when they were finished blooming. You can see they've got lovely little purple flowers, and again, I think they're a great addition, but sometimes they get a little crazy. So I am going to be good this year about deadheading the spent flowers. I mean, you know, it's kind of a nice problem to have, I guess, but I like to have lots of different kinds of plants, not 300 of the same one. Okay, so that's a start. Now here's a perennial that I have a love-hate relationship with. This is Alchemilla mollis, or lady's mantle. It is absolutely gorgeous when raindrops are sitting in the leaves, as you can see by this next photo. But if you do not remove these flower heads before they set seed, holy cow, they spread like nobody's business. This used to be maybe just a couple of plants in here. I bet you we've got 200 now. And I just have a tendency to get so busy this time of year that I don't think to get these flower heads off in time. So a few years ago, I resolved to not let this happen. So what I do is I just follow down to the bottom of the flower stalks and snip them off, and that makes all the difference. It's a way to control them. Okay, so I'm just going to follow down to the bottom of the flower stalk and snip them off. And just because I don't trust these plants, I'm not going to put them in my compost pile, because a lot of times plants are able to continue maturing the seeds after they have been cut off of the main plant. And I certainly don't want billions of these plants in my garden. So it will look a lot tidier, and I'm pulling them off at the right time. I've been able to enjoy these flowers for a couple of weeks, and now I'm just doing a little preventive maintenance. Now I realized that I did a video a few weeks ago on spring bulbs, but this illustrates a point I wanted to drive home. So these are the spent flower stalks of the camas lilies. And do you see all these little sort of mini bulbs here? I do not want these flower stalks to develop seeds, because that will take away energy from the bulb itself. So I am going to snip them off. This is something that is important to do, and you might want to review the spring bulbs video for more information. Now here's another plant that definitely would benefit from deadheading. This is a tangerine geum, and if I don't remove these flower stalks, which are all spent, then the plant is going to focus its energy on forming seeds rather than blooming again. The more that I trim these, the more they're going to bloom. So that's a very good thing. There, that looks a lot tidier, doesn't it? And here you can see how beautiful the flowers are. I definitely want to see more of those. Now this is part of our rose garden. And I've been wanting to show it to you because the roses must have really liked our cool, wet spring, because look what they're giving me to enjoy. Most of the roses that I grow are David Austin English roses. I think they're fabulous. They've got that scent, and the flowers are absolutely gorgeous. So this one is Darcy Bustle, and this other red one here is Munstead Wood. Now with roses, there's a couple things you need to do. Deadheading is one. We'll get into that in a moment. The other thing is that early in the season, I gave them all some organic rose fertilizer. But it's important to do that again once the flowers go through that first flush of bloom, because probably in 2 or 3 weeks at the most, there's going to be this little lull in blooming, and you really need to give them some food so that they have the energy to go ahead and bloom more through the rest of the summer. These roses give me so much joy, and so it's very worth it to make a little effort to sprinkle some fertilizer around the base of the plants. When it comes to deadheading the roses, that is important, again, for the same reasons as I've been mentioning. I don't want the plants to try to form seeds or spend any effort on that spent blossom. So I want to remove them. It's also going to refresh the look of the bush and just make everything look really nice again. Now, in the old days, rosarians used to say that when you're going to deadhead a rose flower, it's important that you follow it down the stem past this leaf that has 3 leaflets on it and cut it down to where there is a leaf that has 5 leaflets on it. They have since said that it actually doesn't matter, although it's always a good idea to prune down to an outward facing leaf rather than an inward facing one. So there, it's off. Plant looks better, and on to the next flower. Okay, that looks a lot better, doesn't it? Now before I move on, I wanted to show you this other David Austin rose that I think is gorgeous. This is Carding Mill. Look at that beautiful peachy apricot color. Wow. Now here's an example of a plant that I do not want to deadhead. This beautiful poppy is Sissinghurst White. If you're not familiar with Sissinghurst Castle Garden, that's located in England, and they have a beautiful white garden that these are grown in. I happen to get the seeds in the States, so that worked out well. But you see these beautiful seed heads. So this is a bread seed poppy, and I want to save the seeds from this plant. I've done it in the past. It is so easy. You just let these pods completely mature. They'll be very pale brown and dry, and if you tap them, you can hear the dry seeds rattling around in them. When you get to that point, just carefully clip off this seed head and dump the seeds into an envelope and save them for next year. So that's my plan. You know, it's so easy to grow poppies because in the late fall or very late winter, you can just come out and sprinkle the seeds where you want them to grow, and when the time comes, they come up. It's amazing. But this is just such a gorgeous poppy. You can bet I want to grow more of these. This is one of our front foundation beds, and our rhododendrons this spring have been absolutely glorious. Most flowers I've ever seen on them, and that has been such a treat. They're looking a little peaked right now, and I always like to deadhead them for a couple of reasons. For one thing, you know, this is the entrance to our front porch, and I want things to look nice and neat. The other thing is that these spent flowers can get in the way of developing new leaves and new buds. And so if you deadhead them right after the flowers turn completely brown, they're very easy to snap off. I'll show you how. Okay, so here's a flower head that has completely lost its blossoms. And I typically wear gloves when I do this because there's a lot of resins in these flower heads. And so you end up with all this sticky stuff on your hands that is very hard to wash off. So anyway, I take a hold of the stem that this flower head is on, and I just go to the bottom of the flower head and then just pull it over until it separates. Now this one is probably even easier to see because here's the flower head. It's lost all of its blossoms, and do you see this new bud that's coming out right here? That's what I don't want to snap off. So my goal is to push on this until it snaps away, and I've left the new bud in place. And there's another new bud right there. Our peonies recently started blooming, and there are no spent flowers yet, but these are ones that I also like to deadhead right before the petals go everywhere because they can make a bit of a mess. So this is one that I just cut down a little bit below the flower, maybe down to the top leaf, and then that's that. Now here's an example of a plant that I definitely want to deadhead. This is one of the many lupines that we have here in our front pollinator garden. And the flowers have been absolutely spectacular. Now they're fading away, and we actually have a 90-degree day coming on Tuesday, so I'm a little worried about how quickly these plants are going to be finished. But the thing is, do you see all these little silvery things here? Those are seed pods. Lupines like to proliferate freely, and I've already got 25 to 30 of these lupine plants in this pollinator garden. There isn't room for any more, and I don't want them being like a thug that takes over the bed because I want diversity in this pollinator garden. So these are plants that I'm definitely going to deadhead And it's another example of one that I don't want to put in my compost pile because I don't want to risk the seeds finishing, maturing, popping open, and whammo, I've got a million lupines. Much as I love these lupines, I don't need that. This is such a wonderful time of year because we all get to enjoy the beautiful flowers we're growing. And so I hope that you are truly enjoying your flower garden. I hope these tips were helpful. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you next week. Happy gardening.